The Immortal Accord, the galaxy's supreme governing body, had a single, inviolable rule for new species ascending to the stars: disarm. Every civilization, upon achieving FTL travel, was required to dismantle its military, its warships, its weapons of mass destruction. In return, the Accord's invincible peacekeeping legions would guarantee their safety. It was a system that had maintained eon-spanning tranquility. The Vulpex, the Cthari, the Silicate Golem collectives all had complied, trading their arsenals for a secured place in the cosmic community. When humanity's first-generation ship, the Odyssey's Dawn, limped into Accord space, the protocol was initiated. The Accord observers, polite and condescending, scanned Earth's historical records. They saw the fractious nation-states, the primitive projectile weapons, the clumsy early fission bombs. They categorized it as a standard, if unusually persistent, pre-unification violent phase. They issued the decree, full demilitarization. Humanity's ambassadors, a tired-looking man and woman in simple, non-regulation uniforms, listened patiently. Then, they declined. Politely, but firmly. It was unprecedented. It was insane. The Accord dispatched a diplomatic fleet, 100 glittering ships of the line, to the Sol system to encourage compliance. They expected to find a fledgling space force, perhaps a few laser-armed patrol vessels. What they found, guarding the orbit of Mars, was a single, battered, gray warship. It was blocky, devoid of elegant energy signatures, covered in crude armor plating and what looked like kinetic weapon barrels. Its transponder identified it as the UNS Wellington. A Vulpex advisor scoffed. One ship? Against the pride of Solara? This is suicide. The human ambassador on the comms, her voice crackling with static, offered a final, grim warning. Do not cross the orbital line of the fourth planet. This is your only warning. The Accord fleet commander, Grand Admiral Cthora, gave the order to advance. The Wellington did not flee. It did not power exotic shields. It simply rotated, presenting its broadside. Then, it spoke. Not with an energy beam, but with a storm of silent, hyper-accelerated tungsten rods. The first volley shattered the pride of Solara's energy shields like glass and turned its forward third into molten scrap. The second volley tore through its reactor, vaporizing it in a silent flash. In 27 seconds, the diplomatic fleet ceased to exist. The Wellington, scarred and venting atmosphere, held its position. The stunned galaxy demanded an explanation. Who were these beings? What was this ship? The human ambassador's response was calm, etched with a fatigue that seemed to span centuries. The Wellington is not a warship of our military. It is a patrol vessel of the United Nations Border Guard. Its crew are not soldiers. They are law enforcement personnel. A silence colder than the void of space followed. The galaxy struggled to comprehend. Law enforcement? If that was their police, what, in the name of all the silent stars, were their actual soldiers like? The answer, whispered in dread-filled corridors across 1,000 worlds, became a myth, a nightmare. Humanity had no standing army. They had no special forces. Because to them every single one of their line infantry, every regular soldier, operated at a level of sheer, uncompromising professionalism and lethality that the rest of the galaxy could only classify as special forces. And they had just declared war on them. Document, Part 1. The observation deck of the Accord's galactic nexus was a panorama of serene beauty. Soft, bioluminescent light from the gas giant below washed over the assembled dignitaries, who floated in clusters, their forms elegant and alien. Grand Ambassador Vorel, a being of crystalline fluidity, watched the feed from the Sol system with a sense of profound disquiet. The image of the blocky, brutalist human ship, the Wellington, hanging against the rust-red backdrop of Mars, was an ugly smear on the perfection of the Accord's order. The report was final. The human delegates, identified as Consularis Thorn and Consul Ilara Vance, had not just refused disarmament, they had destroyed an Accord peacekeeping fleet with a vessel they claimed was a Coast Guard cutter. The official human transmission, now playing on a loop, showed Vance, a woman with sharp gray eyes and hair pulled into a severe bun, speaking with a terrifying calm. The United Nations of Earth does not recognize the Immortal Accord's jurisdiction to demand our disarmament. Our sovereign territory extends to the heliopause of our star. Any further incursions will be met with proportionate defensive action. Proportionate. The word echoed in Vorl's mind. They had vaporized 100 ships. Proportionate. Their technology is bizarre, murmured the Vulpix science advisor, his fur bristling. No shield harmonics we can detect. Primitive fission pulse engines. Their primary weapon appears to be a mass accelerator of terrifying simplicity. They just throw metal. Very, very fast. But, the targeting, Thora, the sole surviving senior officer from the debacle, interjected, her avian crest flattened in shame. They hit critical systems with every shot. No waste. It was surgical. And their ship took direct hits from our plasma lances. The armor absorbed or deflected most of it. It's not energy dissipative. It's just thick. Vorl focused on the two humans in the recording. They wore dark blue uniforms, devoid of the medals, sigils, and rank flash common to every species warriors. The only insignia was a simple embroidered patch on the shoulder, a stylized globe wrapped in olive branches. They looked ordinary. Tired, even. Not like the commanders of a galaxy-shaking power. They looked like administrators. Our historical analysis was flawed, Vorl stated, the light in his crystalline form dimming. We saw their world wars, their internal conflicts, and assumed they were a young, violent species ready to be pacified. We did not see the pattern. The pattern, Ambassador, asked the Golem Collective representative, its voice a chorus of grinding stone. They stopped, Vorl said, the realization chilling him. 2 centuries ago, by their timeline, their global conflict reached a cataclysmic peak. Then, abruptly, it ceased. Not because of unification under a single banner, they still have their nations, but because of a treaty. A set of rules. The Geneva Conventions. We interpreted these as limitations, signs of ethical progress. We were wrong. He called up the data. They did not limit war out of weakness. They limited it because they had become too good at it. They saw that unrestricted warfare would lead to total species extinction. So they created rules to make war survivable. To keep it a contest of soldiers, not of total annihilation. They channeled their destructive ingenuity into defined pathways. The assembly was silent. The concept was alien. War was something to be ended, abolished, not regulated. Our peacekeeping legions, Vorl continued, are designed to overwhelm, to dazzle, to intimidate into surrender. Their tools, this border guard, are designed for something else, to destroy a specific, determined enemy with maximal efficiency and minimal resource expenditure. They have spent their entire history refining the art of killing each other within a set of brutal, pragmatic rules. And, now, they have turned that art outward. A new signal chimed. It was a direct, tight beam transmission from the Sol system. Consul Thorn's face appeared, his expression grave but not hostile. Grand Ambassador Vorl. The incident at Mars was a tragedy we wished to avoid. To prevent further misunderstandings, and to clarify our position, we are dispatching a diplomatic liaison. They will arrive at the Nexus in approximately 72 standard hours via one of our logistical vessels. They are empowered to discuss terms of a ceasefire and potential diplomatic recognition, but not disarmament. Please acknowledge. Vorl exchanged glances with his council. A liaison. A chance to assess these beings up close. We acknowledge, Consul Thorn. We will receive your envoy. The transmission ended. A logistical vessel. Not a warship. That was something. 72 hours later, the entire Nexus watched as the human ship translated into real space. A collective shudder of disbelief went through the observers. It was a squat, utilitarian box of a ship, barely a quarter the size of a standard Accord courier. Its hull was pitted and scorched from atmospheric entry on countless worlds. It had no visible weapons, only docking clamps and sensor arrays. It looked like a cargo hauler. Its name, stenciled in faded white letters on the hull, read, UTA-44 Bison. It docked with a clang that resonated through the elegant station. The docking bay, usually a place of bustling, colorful alien activity, fell silent as the airlock cycled. The door opened. A single human stepped out. He was not what they expected. He was not a giant, not a gleaming cybernetic warrior. He was of average height, clad in a simple, olive-drab uniform, worn and faded in places. He wore a rounded helmet with a darkened visor under one arm. His face was weathered, lined, with a close-cropped beard of gray and black. His eyes, a calm, assessing blue, swept the bay without a trace of awe or fear. On his shoulder was the same Globan olive branch patch. On his chest was a name tape, SGT Major Kairos. He carried no visible weapon, only a worn duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He walked with a quiet, rolling gait that spoke of confidence born not from arrogance, but from immense, hard-won experience. He stopped before the honor guard of towering, armored Vulpex warriors, their ceremonial energy pikes glowing. He gave a small, polite nod. Not a bow. A nod between equals. Sergeant Major Armin Kairos, United Nations Expeditionary Corps, assigned as liaison to the Immortal Accord. Requesting permission to come aboard and meet with Grand Ambassador Vorl. His voice was a low rumble, calm and utterly devoid of subservience or aggression. It was the voice of a man stating a fact. The Vulpex captain looked down at him, then at the ugly, boxy ship behind him. This was the mighty human warrior? This maintenance worker? Follow me, the captain said, his tone dismissive. As Kairos walked through the gleaming corridors of the Nexus, followed by a crowd of whispering, staring aliens, he didn't gaze at the wonders. He noted the width of the corridors, the placement of bulkheads, the types of door controls. He observed the Vulpex guards' stance, the way they held their weapons. He was not a tourist. He was a professional in a new environment, conducting a threat assessment and terrain analysis. In Vorl's chamber, under the soft light, the contrast was even starker. Vorl, a being of shimmering, delicate crystal, and Kairos, a solid, grounded figure of worn cloth and steady flesh. Welcome, Sergeant Major, Vorl began, using his most diplomatic tones. We trust your journey was uneventful. Standard transit, sir, Kairos replied. His eyes were not on Vorl's beautiful form, but on the security panels near the door, the composition of the viewport. The Bison is a reliable bus. A bus? Troop transport, sir. Modified for long-range diplomatic runs. Vorl processed this. The galaxy-terrifying humans use this thing to move their people. We are eager to understand your people's perspective, Sergeant Major. The tragedy at Mars was a defensive action against an unprovoked incursion by an armed fleet into sovereign territory, Kairos finished, his tone still neutral, but the words were iron. The rules of engagement were clear. Warning was given. It was ignored. The border guard performed its duty. Duty? Thora, present in the chamber, could not contain herself. You slaughtered 1,000 beings. Kairos turned his blue eyes on her. The calm in them was more terrifying than any glare. Admiral. If 1,000 armed, unidentified individuals crossed a demarcated border into your homeland after being warned, and advanced on a population center, what would your peacekeepers do? Would they offer tea and negotiations? Or would they stop the threat? Thora fell silent. The peacekeepers would obliterate the threat. The hypocrisy laid bare by this simple, weary soldier was staggering. We wish for peace, Vorl interjected quickly. But peace requires trust. Your refusal to disarm, sir, Kairos interrupted, a slight, respectful dip of his head taking the sting from it. With all due respect, you are asking us to remove our front door because you promised the neighborhood is safe. My people's history is written in the blood of broken promises. We do not have a military in the sense you understand. We have a citizenry that is prepared to defend itself. The border guard are civilians who volunteer for service. The Expeditionary Corps, which I belong to, are volunteers from the border guard who train for operations beyond our borders. We are not conquerors. We are guardians. We will not lay down our tools. And, what are your tools, Sergeant Major? Vorl asked, genuinely curious. What makes a human soldier? Kairos was silent for a long moment. He looked at his own hands, calloused and scarred. Our primary tool, Ambassador, is not a weapon. It is doctrine. It is the knowledge of how to apply violence, in a controlled manner, to achieve a political objective. It is logistics, and field medicine, and small unit tactics, and the will to endure. A human soldier can operate his weapon system, treat a wound, build a shelter, call for fire support, and improvise a solution with whatever is at hand. He is not a specialist in one thing. He is a generalist in survival and mission accomplishment. He looked up, meeting Voil's luminous gaze. The galaxy sees a fancy energy rifle and thinks advanced. We see a complex piece of technology that requires specific power cells, is vulnerable to electromagnetic interference, and has a limited rate of fire. We see a single point of failure. Our tools are simple, rugged, and brutally effective. Because in the end, it's not the weapon. It's the mind and the heart of the being holding it. Voil felt a deep, unsettling awe. This man was not boasting. He was explaining a fundamental truth, as one might explain how to dig a trench. The meeting continued for hours, a dance of diplomacy and veiled threats. Kairos was unflappable. He answered questions with precise, unadorned facts. He deflected provocations with the ease of a man who had heard far worse. He was the embodiment of the human enigma, immense power clothed in absolute simplicity. Later, as Kairos was escorted to his quarters, a luxurious suite far grander than anything on the Bison, he passed a group of young Golem Collective cadets. They were sparring in a training atrium, their silicate forms clashing with loud cracks, practicing elegant, formalized combat forms. Kairos paused, watching. The Vulpex escort sneered. Our peacekeepers train in the highest forms of martial artistry. Perhaps it is something your guardians could learn. Kairos watched a cadet execute a perfect, spinning kick that would have looked impressive in a Halavid. He nodded slowly. It's very pretty. Good for discipline, I'm sure. He turned to leave, then glanced back. Might not work too well in a trench full of mud, with artillery coming in, though. But very pretty. He walked on, leaving the cadets confused and the Vulpex fuming. The first impression was made. The Galactic Empire had met a human regular soldier. And, in his calm, unassuming, terrifyingly competent presence, they began to truly fear what they had awoken. Document, Part 2. Sergeant Major Kairos's presence on the Nexus became a quiet, persistent earthquake. He did not demand. He did not strut. He simply was, a stone of human reality in the stream of galactic presumption. He declined the luxurious quarters, requesting instead a standard crew bunk near his ship, which he was often inside, performing maintenance with a methodical, unhurried diligence. His scheduled cultural exchanges with the peacekeeper officers were disasters for Accord morale. In a tactical simulation, pitted against a celebrated Vulpex strategist, Kairos didn't employ dazzling flanking maneuvers or novel tech. He used attrition logistics. He calculated the Vulpex force's energy cell consumption rates, their hydration needs, and their communication relay intervals. He then simulated a campaign of targeted harassment not to destroy the enemy force, but to delay them, exhaust them, and strain their supply lines until they were forced to retreat without a single major engagement. He won by making the enemy quit. During a demonstration of small arms, the peacekeepers showed off their sleek plasma rifles, vaporizing targets with brilliant pulses of light. Kairos was offered one. He examined it, noted the weight distribution, the cooling vents, then politely handed it back. Thank you. May I demonstrate our standard issue? From his duffel, he produced a weapon that looked like a crude, black metal brick with a grip and a barrel. This is the L-44 infantry rifle. Chemical propellant projectile weapon. Caliber, 7.62 millimeters. He loaded a curved magazine, chambered around with a sharp clack, and took position at the range. The targets were standard holographic silhouettes. The Vulpex range officer smirked. Projectiles? We moved beyond those millennia ago. They are slow, limited by ballistic arcs, and lack stopping power against modern armor. Kairos said nothing. He flipped a small lever on the weapon. The first shot was a sharp, deafening crack that made every alien in the room flinch. The holographic target flickered. He fired again. And, again. The shots came in controlled pairs, the report thunderous in the enclosed space. He hit the center mass of 5 targets in under 4 seconds. Then, he flipped the lever again, shouldered the weapon differently, and, with a single, heavier thump, fired at the target representing a light armored vehicle at 500 meters. The target dissolved, the simulation marking a catastrophic kill. The L-44 has 2 modes, Karros said, his voice cutting through the ringing silence. Semi-automatic for precision, and a low-velocity, high-mass setting for armor penetration. Effective range, 800 meters on the former, 300 on the latter. It uses a simple chemical explosive called cordite. It works in rain, mud, vacuum, and high-radiation environments. It has 73 moving parts. Any one of my soldiers can strip and reassemble it blindfolded in 90 seconds. It does not require a power cell. It requires ammunition, which we can manufacture on any world with basic industrial capacity. It is not advanced. It is reliable. He ejected the magazine, cleared the weapon, and placed it back in his bag. The Vulpex officer stared at the scorch marks on the holographic projector where the penetrator round had been simulated. A simple piece of metal, moving very fast, had just defeated virtual armor that could withstand a dozen plasma bolts. The story spread. The human liaison was not a diplomat, he was a propagandist of terrifying capability, and his message was one of disquieting simplicity. Meanwhile, on the edge of Accord space, in the Rickler sector, a situation was developing. The Rickler, a proud, reptilian species, had chafed under Accord economic policies. A militant faction had seized control of a key hyperspace relay station. Standard peacekeeper legions were dispatched to retake it. The operation was a spectacle. Brilliant ships descended. Legionnaires in glowing armor dropped from the skies, their landing a display of flawless coordination. They demanded the station's surrender. The Rickler militants, armed with plasma casters and sonic grenades, refused. The peacekeepers attacked. And they stalled. The station was a maze of cramped corridors, maintenance ducts, and life support machinery. The Rickler knew the layout. They used hit-and-run tactics, ambushing the peacekeeper squads in tight spaces where their numerical and technological advantage meant little. The peacekeepers, trained for open-field engagements and shock assaults, were bogged down. Their heavy weapons were useless in the confines, their elegant armor was a liability in the close quarters grappling that ensued. Casualties mounted. The broadcasted images of sleek peacekeepers being dragged away by scaly Rickler warriors were a public relations nightmare. Grand Ambassador Vorl watched the reports with growing horror. The Accord's credibility was crumbling. They needed a swift, decisive victory. It was Thora, her pride still burning from Mars, who voiced the unthinkable. We require specialists in this kind of warfare. In confined, irregular combat. All eyes in the council chamber turned to the silent, observing figure of Sergeant Major Karros. He stood against the wall, a silent statue in olive drab. Sergeant Major, Vorl began, his crystalline form pulsing with unease. Your people claim a proficiency in defense. The Rickler station is a defensive position we are struggling to overcome. Would your methods be applicable? Karros had been watching the tactical feeds. He saw the peacekeepers moving in tight, predictable formations, clearing rooms as if in a drill, their movements broadcast on open channels. He saw the Rickler listening, waiting, striking. Sir, Karros said, his voice a low rumble. Your legions are trying to play chess on a board that requires poker. They are showing their hand with every move. The Accord does not engage in metaphor when lives are at stake, snapped a Vulpex counselor. Then, I'll be plain, Karros said, stepping forward. His calm was unnerving. You are using a sledgehammer to perform surgery. You are losing because you are fighting the station, not the enemy in the station. Your troops are trained for set-piece battles. This is asymmetric warfare. And, your troops are trained for this? Vorl asked. Karros almost smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Ambassador, the first chapter of our basic infantry manual is titled Operations in Built-Up Areas. The second is counterinsurgency. This is not a special operation for us. This is Tuesday. The chamber was silent. The implication was clear. We request your assistance, Vorel said, the words tasting of ash. A demonstration. A single squad of your Expeditionary Corps. To show us how it is done. Kairos considered. He looked at the feeds, at the dying peacekeepers. He gave a slow nod. I will relay the request. But, understand this, if we go in, we do it our way. We will need full schematics of the station. We will need your forces to create a diversionary attack at Grid Delta 9 at a precise time. And, you will give us a full operational command channel, encrypted to our standards. You will not listen in. You will not interfere. You will provide the bus ride in and the bus ride out. That is all. A diversion? Why not a full assault with our forces supporting? Thora demanded. Because, Admiral, Kairos said, fixing her with his blue stare, your forces move like a parade ground. The enemy knows you're coming. We need them looking at the parade, while we come in through the back door. We work best in silence, and, in shadow. The request was sent to Sol. The response came in minutes. Consul Vance's face was on the screen. Request granted. One fire team from the 3rd Battalion, 75th Expeditionary Regiment, is being diverted from a training exercise. They will rendezvous with the Accord transport at these coordinates in 6 hours. Sergeant Major Kairos will assume local command and advisory role. Rules of engagement are standard: minimum necessary force, priority on mission objective, neutralization of station command and control. We are transmitting operational protocols now. 6 hours later, a ship even more utilitarian than the Bison slid alongside the Accord command ship. It was angular, gray, and bore the designation ETS-7 Warthog. It docked. The airlock opened. 4 humans stepped out. They were not giants. They wore form-fitting, matte black combat suits, sealed helmets with opaque visors. Their gear was blocky, covered in pouches and webbing. They carried variations of the L-44, but, with attachments, optical scopes, underbarrel launchers. One carried a larger, longer rifle. Another had a heavy pack with a complex antenna. They moved with a fluid, economical grace, a predator's ease. They did not speak. They took positions around Kairos, who had changed into a similar, though less equipped, black suit. Kairos gestured to the 4. Fire Team Lima. This is the situation. He briefed them in terse, clipped sentences, using hand gestures and a holographic map. The humans listened, nodding occasionally. One of them, whose helmet had a single, small red stripe on the brow, pointed to a secondary life support intake. Kairos nodded. Primary. Backup is here. Likely guarded. The Vulpex commander assigned to liaise watched, bewildered. There was no discussion of glory, of honor. It was a technical discussion about angles of approach, airflow, sound propagation, and explosive yield calculations. The Accord transport, a sleek stealth shuttle, carried them to the station's proximity. The diversionary attack began at Delta 9, a massive, noisy assault by Peacekeeper Legionnaires. Plasma fire lit up the void. The stealth shuttle launched the human fire team in a small, unpowered pod towards a seemingly solid section of the station's hull, near the thermal exhaust ports. The pod, coated in radar-absorbent material, was invisible. It magnetically clamped to the hull. One of the humans placed a small packet of putty on the hull, attached a wire, and backed away. A flash, contained and silent a shaped charge. A perfect, man-sized hole was cut directly into a maintenance corridor. They were in. The Accord command ship watched through the station's internal security feeds, which the Rickler had compromised. They saw their own forces struggling. They saw nothing of the humans. It was as if the fire team had vanished. Then, the feeds began to go dark. Not from jamming, but from physical destruction. A camera in Sector Gamma 12 showed a brief blur of black, then, static. A motion sensor in the central duct registered movement, then, was crushed. The Rickler command channel, which Accord cryptographers were struggling to break, erupted in panicked, guttural hisses. Something is in the vents. It took Jalak. Visual. I need a visual. Thermal is useless. They're cold. Ambush in hydroponics. There a burst of static, then, a sound that made every Vulpex in the command center flinch, the short, controlled crack of an L-44, followed by silence. The humans moved like ghosts. They didn't hold positions. They flowed through the station, using the Rickler's own familiarity against them. They set simple, brutal traps, tripwires with fragmentation grenades, motion-activated claymores in choke points. They used suppressed pistols for close encounters, the sound drowned out by the distant thunder of the diversionary battle. The Rickler commander, a massive scarred veteran, finally rallied his best fighters in the central control room. They are few. We hold here. They must come to us. On the feed watching the control room's only entrance, the Accord officers saw it. A small, cylindrical object rolled into the frame. It emitted a deafening bang and a searing flash of light that overloaded the feed. When it cleared a second later, the humans were already inside. They moved in pairs, covering angles. The L-44s spoke in short, precise bursts. The Rickler, disoriented and blinded, were cut down before they could bring their weapons to bear. The human with the red stripe on his helmet approached the Rickler commander, who was clawing at his eyes. The human didn't shoot. He delivered a precise, stunning blow with the stock of his rifle, then zip-tied the commander's hands. The entire operation, from hull breach to secured control room, took 22 minutes. The station's self-destruct, which the peacekeepers hadn't even located, was disarmed by the human with the antenna pack in under a minute. Karos's voice came over the command channel, calm as ever. Objective secured. Control room is ours. 16 enemy combatants neutralized, 1 captured alive. Station is ready for your peacekeepers to mop up. Fireteam Lima is returning to extraction point. We'll need a deck and spray, the vents were filthy. In the Accord command center, the silence was absolute. They had just witnessed a clinical, merciless dissection of a problem that had stymied their finest legions. No heroics. No grand speeches. Just 4 humans, a bag of simple tools, and a terrifyingly effective doctrine. Grand Ambassador Vorl looked at the feed showing the 4 black-clad figures, already in their pod, drifting away from the station. They had not lost a single being. They hadn't even broken a sweat. These were not special forces. This, according to the humans, was a standard infantry fire team. The galaxy's understanding of war had just been shattered, and, in the quiet, a new, primal fear took root. If this was their regular soldiers, what unimaginable horrors were reserved for their true elite? The answer, unknown to them, was the most frightening of all: there were none. The horror was the baseline. Document, Part 3. The storm of repercussions from the Rickler station operation hit the galactic nexus like a psychic tsunami. Publicly, the Immortal Accord hailed it as a joint success, a blending of Accord steadfastness with human tactical expertise. Privately, it was a schism of panic and awe. The visual records, what little there was, were analyzed in secret vaults by every military caste in the galaxy. The 4 humans in black became phantoms, specters used to frighten junior officers. Sergeant Major Karos returned to his bunk on the Nexus, his fireteam departing as silently as they arrived. He resumed his routine maintenance on the Bison, quiet meals in the communal galley, where other species now gave him a wide berth, and his scheduled cultural exchanges, which had become desperately well attended by junior peacekeeper officers, despite official discouragement. It was during one such session, a lecture on extended field logistics and sustainability, that the next crisis found him. Grand Ambassador Vorl himself entered the auditorium, his crystalline form flickering with urgent, polychromatic light. The lecture halted. Sergeant Major, your presence is required. A situation has arisen that defies our parameters. In Vorl's private chambers, the air was thick with tension. Thora was there, along with the head of the Accord Scientific Collegiate, a willowy being named Xyler whose fronds trembled with anxiety. We have a decontamination, Xyler began, his voice a whisper of rustling leaves. On the fringe world of Viridia Prime. A bioresearch outpost studying local xenofauna. There was an incident. A containment breach. Karos waited, his face impassive. The lifeform, Xyler continued, swallowing hard. It is a hyperadaptive parasitic fungus. It releases airborne spores. Upon inhalation by a carbon-based lifeform, it infiltrates the nervous system. It takes control. Not to kill, but to propagate. The infected being becomes a vector, seeking out others to spread the spores through physical contact or close proximity. It is highly contagious, and the incubation period is variable, from minutes to hours. A zombie fungus, Karos stated, his voice flat. Xyler blinked. What? An Earth analog. Ophiocordyceps. It does something similar to insects. You have a plague scenario. Yes. A plague. The outpost's automated quarantine protocols sealed the main habitat dome. But there are 73 Accord personnel inside, scientists, their families, support staff. Our scans show at least 30 are already infected. The others are barricaded in isolated sections. The fungus is learning. It is using the infected to attempt to breach the barricades. They display coordinated behavior. We sent in a peacekeeper biocontainment team, Thora said, her crest drooping. In full sealed armor. They decontaminated on exit. It didn't matter. The spores are microscopic. They found a way in. 3 of the team are now infected, locked in the Deccan chamber. The fungus, it seems to understand technology. It made the infected try to operate the airlock controls. The entire dome must be sterilized from orbit, a Vulpex counselor said, his voice harsh. It is the only way to guarantee containment. A tragic loss, but necessary for the greater good. There are 40 uninfected souls in that dome, Counselor Vorel said, his light dim. Including children. And, if it breaks containment, there will be billions, the counselor retorted. Silence fell. The Accord was trapped between its humanitarian principles and its utter lack of tools for such a nightmare. Their medicine was advanced, but this was a weaponized, intelligent disease. Their soldiers were warriors, not biohazard containment specialists. All eyes, once more, turned to Karos. Your people, Vorel said, hope and shame warring in his tone. Do you have experience with this? Karos was silent for a long moment, thinking. We have protocols. CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. We have units trained for high-risk containment and rescue in contaminated environments. But this is a live, intelligent pathogen. It changes the calculus. Can you help? Vorel asked, the question hanging in the air like a plea. I will consult, Karos said. The transmission to Sol was tense. Consul Vance listened, her face grim. A Class 4 biohazard with possible cognitive infiltration elements. Viridia Prime is outside our territory, but the risk of galactic pandemic is clear. She looked off-screen, conferring with someone. She turned back. We can deploy a team from the 10th CBRN Response Company. They are currently on standby for a training evolution. But, Ambassador Vorel, understand the terms. 1. We require total command authority over the operation from insertion to extraction. 2. Your forces will establish a total exclusion zone, no closer than 50 kilometers. 3. All decisions regarding the handling of infected and uninfected are ours. You will comply without question. The alternative is orbital sterilization. Choose. Vorel looked at the horrified faces of his council. The choice was between certain death for 40 and handing over a sovereign Accord world to human military control. It was no choice at all. We agree to your terms. 36 hours later, a new human ship arrived at the Viridia Prime exclusion zone. It was a bulky, angular vessel, painted in stark white with glaring red crosses and biohazard symbols. Its name was UTM-12 Hippocrates. It looked less like a warship and more like a flying hospital, but its hull was thick, and it had odd, nozzle-like protrusions along its spine. From it descended a single drop pod. It slammed into the ground a kilometer from the contaminated dome. The pod hissed open, and 6 figures emerged. They were utterly alien, even to Kairos, who observed from orbit via a secure feed. They were encased in heavy, powered environmental suits, making them look like robotic hulks. The suits were a matte white, with black visors and the same red crosses. They moved with a ponderous but sure gait, carrying heavy equipment cases. Their leader's voice came over the dedicated channel, deep and filtered. CBRN Response Team Alpha, on site. Call sign Cleaner 1. Sergeant Major Kairos, you are listed as liaison. Confirmed command protocol. Confirmed, Cleaner 1, Kairos responded. You have the ball. Nexus Command is on standby, non-interfering. Understood. Beginning site survey. The team approached the dome. They didn't go to the main airlock. Instead, they used a tool that fired a crystalline drill bit, boring a small hole in the dome's composite hull. They inserted a flexible probe. Data streamed back to the Hippocrates and the command ship: atmospheric analysis, spore density, thermal signatures, audio. The audio was the worst. It was a chorus of ragged breathing, scratching, and a low, wet, gurgling sound that was not quite vocalization. There were also the desperate, whispered prayers of the uninfected, holed up in a storage bay. Pathogen is airborne, density extreme, Cleaner 1 reported, his voice devoid of emotion. Nervous system manipulation confirmed via biosign analysis. Hosts show coordinated movement patterns. Objective is spore propagation. This is a weapon, not an accident. Can you save the uninfected? Vorl asked, unable to help himself. Priority 1, containment. Priority 2, rescue of non-contaminated personnel. They are sequestered in Storage Bay 3. Pathogen carriers are converging on that location. Estimates suggest breach within 2 hours. What is your plan? Thora asked. Plan is 4-phase. Phase 1, establish controlled airlock. Phase 2, neutralize immediate threats to rescue target.